Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson, and welcome to Construction Project Management Principles and Tips. I'm a professor of construction management and I love construction. And today we're going to be talking about a building that I've always thought extremely highly of since I was a little kid, is the Empire State Building. We're going to use this as a case study of things that have happened in the past in the construction industry that we were able to do some magical things with. And today it seems like those things are more further out of reach than we would have thought. So let's dive in and let's talk about it. But first, if you've enjoyed my channel and you enjoy these videos, please help support the channel by clicking the subscribe button and notifications so you can see new videos as they come up. All right, let's take a look. There's this quote that always comes up that I always resonates with me. Those that don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that's kind of like, okay, so it's good when you think about, horrific things that have happened, like wars. And I think that might have been in the context that George Santayana meant it in. But it can also be for a lot of things. And it can be for good things. And also we want to remember the past for some good things. And sometimes we forget about that. That's kind of mostly today's kind of discussion when we're talking about the Empire State Building. Although there's definitely some things about the Empire State Building construction that we might want to not try to repeat, let's just say. But let's take a look at some things and some thoughts around that. I was thinking about a quote that I heard, and when I was a kid, I saw when pretty much everybody my age saw when Neil Armstrong put the foot on the moon. If you were in school, they had it on those big TVs that were up on stands, rolling around, that sort of thing. It was a big deal. It was like huge, right? Kennedy had this mission, we're going to send, and of course it was kind of male dominated in that era. We're going to send a man to the moon and return him safely this decade, right? So it was really it resonated with people. And, quite frankly, they didn't know how they were going to do it exactly when it was said, but it kind of like threw down the gauntlet that we're going to accomplish this great thing in this period of time. And they actually were able to do that, right? And so it's 2020, end of 2022, going to 23, right? And we haven't been back since the 70s. And it's usually these kind of things when you look back at, we've progressed a long way. Like, you want to look at the first calculator that I saw. It was like this beast of a thing, and it could add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and that was about it. And it cost like $200 back then in the 70s, right? And it's free on your phone as an app. You can buy a cheap one for $1, those types of things today. We've advanced a lot in things, but I don't think we've advanced on our progress to going to the moon and back. I think there's this now bigger mission, with Elon Musk, SpaceX, and other ones, Blue Origin, and NASA's recommitment and the US government's recommitment towards the space program, that now we're getting ambitious again to do things. But the problem is we kind of forgot how to do the original thing. So we kind of have to relearn that, retest that with today's technology and go through all that extra effort. So that happens in high-tech areas. But I would also say sometimes it happens in construction, that we did certain things and we kind of maybe didn't grow from that, at least as an industry in a lot of ways. So I like to bring up some thought-provoking questions in this discussion. The Empire State Building, look, designed and constructed in 20 months. Designed, engineered, and constructed in 20 months. Look at this, right? 100-plus floor building done in that period of time in 1930. 2022, I'm going to say we would be lucky to get out of the ground in that time in a lot of our projects today. So, what are some of the things that we could take from this and say, could we do this better even still today and get us moving? Now, I'm going to qualify some of these things. So I'm not going to try to paint this perfect Pollyanna picture of this. There's some elements here that we have to think about. And anytime you look in the past, you have to really sort of, was it really that good? Or what was some of the things that could have happened? So, could we do this today? Why or why not? Have we forgotten something? Like the space program? Is there something we can relearn from here? I came across this article when I was thinking about this topic, and it's such a small world. It's amazing, and I noticed the author Kenneth Robson. It's funny because my first foray to China was in 1996, and I remember meeting Ken at a construction conference there, and we toured the Forbidden City. And I also remember him auditing one of our degree programs about 10 years ago. So it's funny how the construction industry, I tell my students this, it's such a huge industry, but it's such a small industry that I'd pull up one of his papers and it happened to be on the topic that's so interesting to me. But that's not surprising with Ken and his background in that. And so this paper actually looks at the Empire State Building. And I tried it just before this. So if you actually type this title into Google, it should come up and you can download the full paper. It's really interesting. And it's got quite a few images and different things on it that way. But it actually gets into that, looking at the Empire State Building from the perspective of a lean delivery system, because that's something I've been really dedicated to the last few years, is lean construction methodologies and how can we improve. I've been looking at lean manufacturing going back 15, 20 years, but really in the last 7 or 8 years, I've kind of increased my focus in this area quite significantly. And so, built in that short time period, and it's still standing, still quite the structure today. Of course, it's had to have restoration done, like everything, but fabulous New York icon, right? Important individuals on the Empire State Building project that were responsible for the design and construction work. This is kind of a listing of some of the important individuals: architects Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon; contractors, the Starrett brothers and Ecan, basically forming a consortium there; general contractors; developers for the Empire State Building. This gets pretty interesting. Was Raskop and DuPont. And DuPont, I believe, was the CEO of GM, and Raskop was the vice president of GM. So we can see some influence there in the development side of the thinking, like, at that time, Fordism, Taylorism in the manufacturing sort of way of doing things was really well understood. And it had maybe a decade and a half to really develop itself. The assembly line goes back to around 1910, 1908, something in that framework. And so it's had time to really sort of take root, the advantages to flow and manufacturing processes and systems. Construction, not really. And by the way, the Empire State Building is well before lean construction methodologies. And lean construction methodologies really developed a lot out of the lean manufacturing system, which really had its root again in the car sector, which was the Toyota production system. And Toyota had a lot of early day lookings in the 50s at looking when basically after the war, redevelopment in Japan and investment, the work of Deming and Duran, really looked at the manufacturing processes and how things could be done better. And so then they really sort of developed looking at the US and how they did things, but certain things didn't work, like having big inventories, how they could smooth out that production line and improve the system so that there's a much better flow, more just in time in the process. But this building here, my point is, it was built before that, yet it had a lot of early lean practices without lean saying it. And to me, lean's like a word, and it's basically a lot of background. There's a lot of people that invested their lives in the development of it. But still, optimizing, we're thinking about adding value, reducing waste, respect for people, collaboration. There's a lot of elements that we have for lean that today we look at. And some of them were definitely there. Not all of them. Some of them were definitely there. So the Empire State Building, like some of the things that wasn't so great, I'll definitely say, from the images, from the videos, because again, you can go online, you can look at some of the video channels that show old footage and different things like that. You can see, if you look, some of the sites were not all that super clean. So one of the things with lean is the 5 S's, right? Basically trying to really make the place shine, not have anything extra in your way, that sort of thing. You can see some of elements where the 5 S's could make improvements there. Safety, well, at that time in the 1930s, construction was not the safest place to be. There's no fall arrest systems. There's no, hard hat. Well, there might have been some hard hats, but definitely not all of them. And, safety wear, personal protective equipment, all that stuff. That came much later. And we still have improvements, quite honestly, to make in our industry overall. So I want to have a holier than thou sort of take on this. But definitely, those are things, if I'm going to use George Santayana, I don't want to repeat those things from the past, right? In new thinking. So we'll take that part and we'll say that was good in the day, but we're not going to put that into something that we want to take into the future, learning from the Empire State Building. I believe if you look it up, I think 5 people died in the construction of the Empire State Building, which for a project at that time with those kind of safety measures wasn't too bad, but we could do better. But the opportunity, all right, so that's, it was built. Now, it was built during the Great Depression. So there are some things that happened as a result of that made that time period more easily produced. If we think about it, the Great Depression, so basically around the Hoover Dam time, which it was like a Depression type project, the Hoover Dam, contracts were signed in September 1929, just before the Great Depression began, and one of the things they struggled with afterwards was getting all of the offices rented. There was a lot of news and buzz. They built this big thing and, they can't rent it. Of course, that changed pretty rapidly once the economy got going, especially post-World War II, that it, became this icon for New York. But as a result of this, you would have had access to the best trades. I am quite sure the best, most skilled trades, Greater New York, and people would have came from even outside that area to work on that project that had the skill sets, 1 for a lack of work and 2 for the opportunity to be involved in such a magnificent project, right? Also, pricing for the project, you would have been able to get pretty good terms on things like everything. If you're in a recession, it's easier to get better terms than if you're in a boom. I live in Toronto, Canada. We, over the last number of years, have had the most cranes in North America quite steadily. We've been growing really rapidly. That's great. I love Toronto, but it also means it's tight work. It means it's difficult to get projects done because to get the best resources, highly skilled people, there's a shortage. It's great for my students that graduate and do well, and they get great opportunities as a result. But, if you're trying to fit something like this magnitude in that time period in the city of Toronto, I'm going to say good luck. All right. But I still believe there is a lot we can learn because I see a lot of waste in what we do in our existing projects. And there were things that they did very well there. So that's, there's this opportunity, and there are some things that made it better. But you have to also consider they had the technology of 1930 compared to we have the technology of today. We also have much more sophisticated building systems and building automation systems, and they all have to speak to each other, which adds to the level of complexity significantly more. So what were some of the things that was sort of determined and decided upon? Well, one was they recognized, and I think that was a lot from the developer's side, they recognized that in manufacturing, all the work that goes up into setting things up and pre-planning things. They also recognized there's no way that the architects would really understand the intricacies of putting everything together. So they really got into developing a lean approach to the design. And they brought in early the contractors, and the contractors brought in early the major trades, and things like the elevator consultants. Don't forget, elevators were in their infancy at that time, especially going that kind of height and being able to use the most advanced technology to do it at the time. So they brought everybody in early, and they designed for production. They did work structuring. The design was considering, can we get this built faster doing this way? And looking at it and involving the trades and really thinking about the sequencing. Just in time was front and center. It's often said that the steel was still warm when it arrived at the site. All right, so it had come out of the kilns. It was still warm when it arrived at the site. So that just in time aspect, or as we call today, most responsible moment aspect, or last responsible moment aspect, brought into it. Trying to look very closely at zoning the work, chunking the work, having a predictable and reliable workflow. Really sort of, it was line of balance ahead of its time, which if you want to get into some of the more modern practices that some trainers and skilled people in the US and parts of Canada are really developing and really enacting and getting going now, tack time and zoning things out and going to a certain beat with the work. And so there was a very strong sequence, and there was a very high leveling of the resources necessary to go at that beat, and ensuring that there's minimal buffers, but buffers just the same, to reduce variation. If something slows things slightly down, there was a little bit of give in that movement so that you didn't get these ripple effects of bottlenecks occurring. So they did really well with that. They considered very much the technology of what they had and applied it in unused ways before. They really were strategic with the location of their derricks to move materials up the building, and then within the floors they built an internal railway system on each floor that they could put the materials in these buckets. Then the buckets would hold like 6 or 8 wheelbarrows full of materials that they could move around the floors very quickly and transport it very quickly. So they were considering the 8 areas of waste, and one of the key ones being wasted motion, ensuring that things were effectively delivered just in time to be installed so that you had this continuous workflow. The term parade of trades comes from this background with the Empire State Building. The idea, one of the people that was interviewed, senior people that worked on the project, said it's this concept of the parade of trades, is that we have this parade of trades going up the building and marching out the top. Much like a assembly line, instead of the line moving, it is actually the trade that's moving. But that sort of manufacturing concept. So the Empire State Building, I think, is an excellent project when we consider that. And when we consider that, all of these elements, there is good. A lot of good things that I think we often forget today, like the early design requiring the collaboration with the trade. With the design, bid, build, it's already designed. So it's late to try to get things that it's more easy to produce it, right? With this early involvement, provides those opportunities. So different contract models. There's a number of hybrid contracts that are coming out. We've got the integrated project delivery model, but it's got to be that we optimize more for the project instead of the individual. You know, when you think about basketball and you think about how you can have a great player, but they need to, everybody on the team needs to rise up if you're going to win the championship. It's not going to be won by one person. You got to get the rest of the team to rise up. And sometimes it can be done a little bit, maybe not with the clear respect for people that we necessarily use. But if you watched Michael Jordan's Last Dance, you would have seen, you know, basically everybody on that team was one way or the other, by hook or by crook, raised up to be a better player. And nobody was going to slack off in practices. Everybody had to raise up their game. And they were able to win 6 championships that way. Maybe taking a more stoic approach, being from Toronto, Kawhi Leonard came to Toronto. First thing, wants to talk to Lowry, wants to get the team involved, wants to get everybody working together, that collaboration process, right? Raise everybody's game. You got somebody that's been there and done it and won it, that gets the respect of others. When there's tough times, they look for that leadership. That leadership is cool, calm, and collective, and able to get the team working together to win the game. We don't win the project by everybody doing their own thing to get in and out and make as much profit as possible. We win the project by getting people to collaborate to figure out better, more efficient ways to do things so that everybody can win from this process, not have this system of a few winners and a whole bunch of losers. So construction, one of the main things I think from here is that early collaboration and optimizing for the project, not optimizing for the individual. So I hope you enjoyed this quick little discussion on the Empire State Building. I know I really enjoyed thinking and looking this stuff up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please help support the channel. Click subscribe, click notifications, and we'll keep working on these as we go forward. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.